There's many athletes, you were one of them, who truly specialize in a half guard game, and they make it the basis of their entire bottom game. Interestingly, there's an equal number of athletes who specialize in top half guard. You think of people like Rodolfo Vieira, Roger Gracie, their whole game on top was force half guard and do all their passing from there. So there's kind of a paradox involved here. Many players believe that half guard is the single best sweeping position from bottom, and they will force their way to a half guard and bottom position and work deliberately from there. And there's an equal number of athletes who believe that half guard top is one of the premier passing positions, and they will force their way to half guard and start passing from there. As a coach, I'm known as someone who encourages his athletes when they're passing to force half guard and use that as one of their favorite passing positions. And as a coach, I'm also known as someone who strongly favors the idea of getting to half guard from bottom position and sweeping people. So there's kind of a paradox going on here. How does this work? How is it that half guard top is one of the favored positions and half guard bottom is also one of the favored positions? It seems like an overt contradiction.
That makes sense.
Or paradox. Ultimately, the way you resolve this paradox is to understand there's a key element that will make half guard either the path to heaven or the path to hell, depending upon one thing, and that's control of the bottom athlete's head and shoulders. Okay? If I'm working from bottom half guard and Bernardo Faria gets control of my head and shoulders in a way where he constrains head movement and pins both of my shoulders to the mat, half guard bottom is not a desirable place to be under those conditions. It's a desirable place for him as the passing athlete to be. So for example, if we're working here and Bernardo goes underneath my arm on the far side here and underneath my head here, he's locked his hands. He's created a situation where he's got closed wedges around my head and shoulders. And as a result, I can't move from one shoulder to the other, and both shoulders are pinned down to the mat. This has a very detrimental effect on my head position and my ability to move my hips. And as a result, this, I think everyone would agree, is a very fine passing position. So yeah, I pulled half guard, but there's no advantage conferred to me as a bottom athlete here. This is a position of disadvantage. And it's very easy from here for Bernardo to start passing. Just getting half guard per se is not a good thing. It has to be half guard with a set of conditions. And those conditions are my head and shoulders must be free to move. I must be able to move from one shoulder to the other. If I can't do that, if both shoulders are pinned, this is a disastrous position and not one to be highly valued at all. So what we need to do is somehow protect our head and shoulders from our opponent's ability to control us. Okay, so that's the paradox of half guard, that it can at the same time be one of the best passing positions for the top athlete and one of the best sweeping positions for the bottom athlete. Now, in addition to the paradox of half guard, to understand this position, we've got to understand something else, Bernardo, the idea of the appeal of half guard. You were an athlete who had a strong appeal to half guard bottom. There are many others too. And we've got to start asking ourselves, okay, as an athlete, why would I willingly, actively seek to get into the half guard position? And I think you'll agree with me on this, Bernardo, the real appeal of half guard bottom is the idea that it strongly limits the amount of motion and the need for speed in bottom position. Why is this? Okay, it comes out of something that I often talk about, the iron law of speed and connection. As a general rule in the sport of jiu-jitsu, the more connection two athletes have to each other, the lower the speed of the engagement. Okay. It also has something which is very important for sweeping in general. This is the idea of an action-reaction. Okay. I always recommend, I'm certainly not alone in this, whenever you want to take people forwards, start by pushing them backwards. Okay. Jiu-jitsu is a competitive combat sport. Anytime you try to force something on an opponent, they're going to push back. Okay. So if I want to take my opponent forwards, almost always we initiate with a push backwards, and then we switch to a pull. Let's have a look at how this occurs. The good news is, whether we use cross grip or belt grip, both grips give an ability to push. Okay, so what we typically do in these situations is I know that ultimately I want to pull my opponent. Okay, but we want to accentuate the forces we can develop here by starting with a push, even though I know I'm going to terminate with a pull. So I push into my opponent, and when I feel the push back, that's exactly when we go through. Okay, the beauty of practicing back roll sweeps is they make this into a habit on your part. One of the greatest habits that you, as a developing athlete, can build is this capacity to use the action-reaction of push-pull dynamic and build them into your sweeps. I promise you, your sweeping game will greatly increase just on this simple insight alone. So often you see people play a very direct game, okay, and they become predictable, okay. Once I get those grips on my opponent, we all know what's coming next. And so they know that ultimately we're going to be pulling an opponent forwards, and they just go straight to a pull. Build some subtlety into your game. Start using misdirection as the basis of your attacks. If you want to pull people, start with a push, okay? And when you feel them pushing back in reaction, that's when you come back in the direction you really want. Always have a clear understanding that there's two things going on here. You have to create the illusion of what you want, which you try to sell to an opponent. And then in the back of your mind, you have what you really want to do, which you keep to yourself. Always try to use this subterfuge in all the major moves that you employ. Don't go directly to them, go indirectly, often in the opposite direction. And you often get far, far better results. So it's a beautiful suite for developing athletes to work with for those reasons. It teaches you a lot about body movement. The back roll is a foundational movement of the sport, and it's used in a very practical way. It's used by top athletes in competition and is often seen working on some of the best athletes in the world. That's a great sign to you that it's a high percentage move. And it employs these valuable insights of action and reaction, which permeate throughout the sport of jiu-jitsu and will create a habit in you that will just make you a better sweeper from bottom position overall, as opposed to just this one move.
Yeah, so John, things that caught my attention here was the idea of the action and reaction in the half guard, that sometimes you don't think so much about it in the half guard, right?
You know why? Because it's mostly seen as a static position. Most people say, oh, half guard, you just hold on tight, you get connection. But even there's a subtlety of push and pull.
I agree. So this thing, also the thing you just mentioned in the beginning about like how it's the type of game that you don't need speed. So you can go very slow. I think that's probably why like so many old grapplers play half guard.
I agree. You know, a fascinating thing about watching your matches, Bernardo, is how you fought some of the most dynamic athletes in jiu-jitsu history. Like for example, Leandro Lowe. He's known for his dynamicism. But when they fought you, the matches look like slow motion.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
You could literally take the fastest people in the sport and make them look slow. And half guard is one of the few positions where you can do this. And you built a career on this.
And also yesterday we were talking about it, like how good is half guard for connections.
Yes.
Right? Like how you can connect things from half guard very easy, like connecting half guard with a passing and etc. So
and contrasting that with many other popular guard positions where once you complete a sweep from certain kinds of guard, for example, spider guard, then you have to switch to a completely different set of operations. Okay, here's the sweep, now I've got to completely change. There's no real connection between the sweep and the follow-up. Whereas from half guard, there's so much physical closeness to your opponent that you're right in on the action. The minute you finish the sweep, you're ready to start passing.
I agree. And guys, we know that most of the audience who follows is like older grapplers, and I think half guard is the game for them because you don't need to be fast, you don't need to be explosive. And
in my case, I have a crippled leg and a hip replacement, so it's
so
a
half
perfect game
is
for
the way
me.
to go.
Yeah, and on the other hand, we also don't want to say like you've got to be old or crippled in order to use
everybody can do it.
You were a good athlete in your own way, but you were young and strong. But it has the potential to take situations where you're faced with someone who you believe is more athletic than yourself and shut down their athleticism. And that's a wonderful thing. That's ultimately what jiu-jitsu is about.
I agree 100%. And guys, we just shot an entire structure all about half guard. That's going to be part of the fundamental series from John, the Go Further Faster. So make sure to check it out on bjjfanatics.com.
Welcome to the Go Further Faster half guard video. There's a sense in which this begins with a paradox. Very often, I coach my athletes to force half guard as one of the premier passing positions for the top athlete. At the same time, I also coach the bottom athlete to specifically go towards half guard as one of the premier sweeping and control positions in the sport. If indeed the top athlete can control the head and shoulders of the bottom athlete, yes, it is one of the strongest passing positions in the sport. But if the bottom athlete can deny head and shoulder control to the top athlete, it rapidly becomes one of the best sweeping and control positions in the sport. Half guard is a position which anyone in all age categories, all weight categories, and all skill levels can use with tremendous effect to slow down the match and create ideal sweeping conditions that'll take you from bottom position to top position.